Welcome to BevCam's production of Conversations with Candidates. I'm Gina Coburn, your host for this segment, and right now we are talking to Duane Anderson, who is candidate for Ward 5 School Committee. Welcome to the show, Duane.
Thank you.
So tell the voters, why are you running for office?
Well, I've been involved in education my whole life, having worked on all different levels. I've worked in 3 different colleges and universities. I actually worked at Memorial Middle School for a couple years as a substitute teacher, and then a year as an acting guidance counselor. And I really enjoyed that experience. I really, being of the age I am, I never went to a middle school, but it was really interesting working in middle school, and I really like the approach that the Beverly Middle Schools have had with the team approach. Up to this current time, I work at the Kumon Math and Reading Center in Middleton, working with the youngest of children, the 4-, 5-, and 6-year-olds in our program. So I've been in education my whole life, and I feel I've learned a lot through that experience. I think I have something to offer, and so I'd like to bring that to the Beverly School Committee.
So what, in your opinion, are the biggest challenges facing the Beverly school system in this next term?
Well, I think the biggest challenge overall, well, of course there's some overall challenges, but as far as something very concrete, the middle school issue is I think the biggest issue. The Briscoe building is just absolutely inadequate. All kinds of problems there, inadequate classrooms. I was visiting a friend of mine there who was a guidance counselor a few months back, and you could hear the conversations in the next room. There's just a lot of physical problems with the building, and in addition to its size. So I think that's the biggest issue, and what configuration that new middle school will look like. There's talk about perhaps moving it to being a 5, 6, 7, 8 versus what it's been typically has been a 6, 7, 8. And I have some concerns about that. I'm not absolutely opposed to it, but I'd like to learn more about how that would work, because I know from having worked there in a middle school that there's a huge difference between a 6th grader in September and an 8th grader in May or June. So to add 5th to that, I really would need to see how that would work before I could support it. And of course, then just the ongoing issues, I think, of budget. We're facing year in and year out issues of budget. So that's a major issue. And also just striving for excellence in the system. I think Beverly school systems are doing a good job, but I think we can still do better. That's been indicative of some of the scores that we've gotten, that we're doing okay, but we definitely could do better. So I think those are the 3 major issues that I see.
Okay. What are your thoughts on the recruiting process for the new superintendent?
Well, it's as I understand it, it's going fairly well, but it's a real challenge. I think it seems like there almost seems like there's a shortage of people who really have the skills and expertise that a school system needs. So I think it's really important that whenever we're doing a search, that we really do extensive outreach to try to get the best candidates possible. And I think there have been some issues that have discouraged some people from coming to Beverly too. So I think we really need to work at overall improving our system and improving our facilities so that we attract really good people.
And what do you think the issues were?
Well, I don't know. I've just, from talking to people, people who have been, who are superintendents. I've got a couple of friends that are school superintendents, and I guess there's a perception, whether it's valid or not, I haven't been there, that people don't want to come work with this school committee, that there have been issues there. So I don't, like I say, I need to get in there and really see for myself. But.
Okay.
Yeah.
So if you're elected, and this will be the first time you'll be sitting on the school committee here in Beverly,
Mm-hmm.
How will you educate yourself on the workings of the committee, the responsibilities of the board, the interactions with the other committee members?
Yeah. Well, I've already started that process by by observing the meetings on BevCam, in addition to reading minutes and keeping up on the issues that they've been facing. And it would just be a process of continuing to do that, continuing to read, to get myself more up to speed with some of the issues on a state and national level. Of course, this core curriculum being a major one. So it would just be an ongoing process of research. I've served on major boards of educational organizations in the past. I was chairman of my National Professional Association, which is the National Association for Campus Activities. I served on the board for 8 years and was finance chairman for a couple of years and then national chairman. So I'm familiar with the way boards work, and it did that job, particularly since it wasn't it was a national board. There was a lot of homework to do to be prepared, because you weren't meeting constantly. You were meeting 2 or 3 times a year, so it was a lot of homework.
Well, these guys meet. This committee meets, I would say, at least weekly.
Yes.
It seems.
Yeah.
So you've mentioned this a little bit, but let's elaborate on your observations of the existing school committee. What are some of the things that you have observed that have worked well that you would plan to emulate or continue?
Well, obviously this facility we're sitting in is an example of something that's worked well. The planning that went through this high school, I think, was excellent, both in terms of the sheer space, but also getting it to the best technology possible. Everything from this studio to the solar panels on the roof, I think have been an excellent example of how to do things right. So I think that process has been a very good one. I guess the only concern I would have over the years about our planning in the school committee has to do with the middle school. And I just think, and I know there were lots of factors that went into it, but it does seem unfortunate to me that we've been left with the oldest building is the building that's still operational, when newer buildings were renovated and improved. It seemed to me that perhaps that could have been given a higher priority, but I know that there were challenges across the board. Of course, the big challenge was here at the high school, but there were also challenges with some of the elementary schools as well. So, yeah.
But in terms of how the committee those are their decisions. But in terms of how they function as a committee, are there things that you've observed that you would say? And at this point we could go, because the second question was what's not working. What have you observed in terms of how they interact with each other or how they make decisions that you would like to continue? Or are there things that you would like to see done differently if you were on the committee?
Yeah. Oh, it seems to me the process is pretty good. There seems to be a good exchange of ideas. I don't see any major issues in how the committee functions. Everybody seems to have their opportunities to have input. So I think it functions fairly well in that respect.
Okay.
Yeah.
So if you're elected as a school committee member, now you're in a role where you're looking out for the schools, but you're also a taxpayer.
Yeah.
So how will you balance those sometimes competing roles in your own life?
Yeah.
And with decisions?
Yeah. Well, it really is a big challenge right now, because the schools need all the resources that they can possibly get. But I do have concerns. As a taxpayer, I think we're taxed at a fairly high level in Beverly, and our tax increases go up basically to the max every year. And I think that, 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 So I guess the big thing is just to try to be sure we have efficiencies in the system, and some of the ideas that are being discussed. I was just listening to the at-large debate last night, and the idea of sharing more of the resources between the city and the schools in terms of how they do things. I think we need to explore every opportunity to do that. One of them that was being discussed last night was the personnel offices. Do we have to have two separate personnel offices, or could we combine those offices into one? So there may be more efficiencies that can be gained there by combining our efforts. And perhaps there may be ways in which we can look to our neighboring school systems to try to do things more collaboratively there, and that way keep our expenses down and have financial savings.
Do you want to elaborate on what we would do with a neighboring school system?
Well, I mean, the obvious huge financial issue for all of the school systems is special needs. It's a very, very expensive part of the school committee budget. That might be an area where we might be able to gain some efficiencies by working together and not duplicating services there. Yeah.
Okay. Do you think any of your personal interests might conflict with your role on the school committee?
I really don't think so. I think, the fact that I don't have any children in the school system, I guess, eliminates some of those possible conflicts. I guess, your position as a taxpayer is sort of an automatic conflict. But I don't really, I really believe in schools. I believe in the power of education, and the fact that we really need to have a commitment there. So I think my commitment to education sort of outweighs my personal fiscal issues, being a taxpayer. So, I'm hoping that there might be some ways that we might be able to do some creative things in terms of, particularly in terms of faculty and staff. I know, we have union issues and things like that, but I always wondered, having worked exclusively in private colleges and universities, is there a way that perhaps we could endow some positions in the public school system and still work within the union guidelines? That might be a way that we could accomplish two things: some financial savings, but also help us to keep and attract some of the best teachers that we can possibly get.
Do you mean endow like a university would endow a chair?
Yeah.
Like a charitable organization would fund a position?
Yeah, something like that, yeah. I know there might be some issues with that in terms of laws and regulations and the union issues, but I think it's worth exploring if that might be a way to make a statement that we really want quality people in our classrooms. Yeah.
So homeowners in Beverly, I assume where you live there are, and my neighborhood is probably very much like your neighborhood because I'm also in Ward 5, but you see young people, you see young families move in. It's always exciting, see a house turn over. And, they may or may not have kids, but then at some point the question comes up and, you may have been asked or encountered this where that family is considering moving because they're concerned about the school system or sending their kids to private school. Have you encountered people asking you your opinion, or if you were to be asked your opinion?
Yeah, absolutely. I've been, in fact, this very morning I was at the dog park with my dog early this morning, and actually it's a grandparent that was there was concerned about the middle school situation with the possibility that they might move to a 5, 6, 7, 8 situation. Her grandson, I believe, is in 2nd grade, And so she was concerned about that. Yeah, so been asked questions about that also in terms of, I have some other friends, actually coincidentally happen to be grandparents as well, that are facing this decision very soon about where their 8th grader goes to high school. And so they're exploring private schools as well as school choice and other options. You know, in that case, I pointed out to them that, you know, the high school here really does have a pretty broad curriculum, lots of advanced classes, and things that I believe some of the private schools actually can't compete with in terms of the breadth and variety of advanced placement classes that we have at the high school. So you know, there's definitely some pluses to consider Beverly High School. Yeah.
And Beverly Schools.
Yes.
Okay, so how did you feel, because you're not on the school committee yet, so you're just like me hearing it for the first time on the news, the headline of a couple weeks ago about there being a sexting scandal in Beverly. How did that make you feel as just someone who is going to, you know, is hopefully you're going to be on the school committee?
Yeah. Well, needless to say, I was kind of shocked and concerned, and it's unfortunate. I guess it's kind of a sign of our times. And one of the concerns I've always had about public schools is the expectations of our schools to be involved in a variety of issues that have to do with our society, and you know, I think there's a balance there between how much of issues like this are school issues and how much are just issues in the community. And you know, schools for years have it started, I think probably started with the polio vaccine. You know, the idea that schools would take responsibility to make sure students were vaccinated. So you know, there's a concern there. But as far as the particulars of the case, it just, like I say, it was just a shock to me, and I don't know. Sometimes I almost wonder if we should move to the point where cell phones are locked up when they come in the door or something like that. These cell phones have really become a problem throughout our society. I mean, I'm currently, and have for the past 3/4 of a year, been working as a crossing guard near my home, and you know, it just amazes me what I see standing there. In some cases, parents with children in the back seat, and it's a 4-minute drive from house to school, but they've got to be talking on the cell phone in the midst of that. So, yeah, I don't know too much about the particulars about how the schools have been dealing with it, and that's probably appropriate. It seems like I think they've done an excellent job of containing the information that's gone out. I think that's as it should be. It's really an issue between the parents and the children, and the schools, I think, can help facilitate that. But I think, you know, what we need to do is to continue to, and I'm sure the schools are doing this, to continue to try to educate the students about the issues around texting, regardless if it's sexting or not, in that, and also the use of the internet, in that once it's out there, you can't pull it back. It's not like when I was a kid and somebody, you know, maybe passed an inappropriate note to somebody, you know,
right,
it would get ripped up and destroyed, and that was the end of it. And it's not that way anymore with the internet.
And it's an issue for, we were saying, for adults as well as children.
Absolutely.
You had mentioned earlier in your response something about that people feel public schools are responsible for so many social issues. Do you feel that that's specific to public schools, or do you think there's an expectation that all schools, I mean, do you think the public schools are being judged a little unfairly?
Oh, I think it's definitely a much higher expectation in the public schools. And it's nothing new. It's been that way for a long time. I know when I was a guidance counselor, it was there were several surprises along the way with issues that I and the teachers, you know, had to deal with the parents, which, you know, in some cases where we really didn't have any choice but to deal with them. But it's like, geez, should the school have to be the place where this gets dealt with, or should it be dealt with professionals outside the school? You know, whether they be psychologists or doctors or people like that. Yeah, it's there's an awful lot that the schools have been expected to take care of. Yeah.
So if you're not elected, how will you stay involved in Beverly politics, and if so, how will you do that?
Yeah, if not, I think I'm going to make myself available for either through the new mayor or through the school committee to be involved in subcommittee work. And so there are opportunities there, I think, where I can make a contribution and would be interested in doing so. I've always been interested in government and schools, and so I hope that should I not be elected, there might be some places there that I might get involved in. I think there's probably going to be a fair amount of change as we move in through this election. With obviously there's a new mayor regardless, and a number of new people on the city council. So I hope to get involved that way. I would hope that I know both candidates for mayor quite well, and would hope that I might be able to get an appointment there or through the school committee.
So for your voters, and again, you're running. Are you running for school committee for the first time?
Yes.
Okay. Yes. So why should they vote for you? Why should I vote for you? And I'm entrusting, you know, the management of my schools to you.
Yeah. Well, I think part of it is my experience. Like I said, I've been involved in schools and, you know, all different levels. As I said in a piece I wrote for The Citizen, I've worked with 3-year-olds, and in fact, I just left working with a 73-year-old that I tutor. So I've got a range of experience in terms of ages of the children. I have a range of experience in terms of the settings that I've worked in. And so I bring that to the position. And through work in various organizations, for instance, I'm on the staff administration committee at my church. So I've been involved in hiring and interviewing and recruiting of staff. I've done that also on the national level. While I was on the national board, we actually, unfortunately, were in the position we actually terminated our executive director, and so I was involved in that, and then in the search that followed to hire a new executive director. So I have experience with staffing and hiring, and I think you know, the fact that I was elected to be chairman of my National Professional Association, I think is indicative of the fact that I have a style and a way of operating that gains the respect of my colleagues, and enables me to participate in decisions and make good decisions. You know, while I was in my professional association, we made a lot of really hard decisions and some really good decisions to move us forward and to keep us current as we moved along. So I think I'm a good decision maker, and can compromise and can work with other people in that, you know, board committee setting in a very responsible way.
And what do you want to mention the national board that you're chairperson of?
Yeah, I was chair. Well, I was chair. You know, it was when I was working at colleges. It's called the National Association for Campus Activities.
Oh, campus activities.
Yeah, it's all of the people involved in running the co-curricular program on campuses. I started out as in that organization. My first elected position was as vice chair for educational services. So I was responsible for overall for developing the educational program that we offered at our conventions And we also offered summer workshops and a variety of things like that. So that whole area of education was where I started in that involvement.
Right. Well, any more parting words? Because we're just about wrapping up here.
Yeah. No, I just would ask the voters to give me careful consideration and look at my background, and I'm trying to get out and meet as many people in the ward as I can. We've only got a couple weeks left, but
Yep.
still working at it, and just take a look at my record, and if you think it's appropriate, give me your support.
Well, thank you. Duane Anderson, who again, if you missed the beginning of the show, is running for Ward 5 School Committee. My name is Gina Coburn, and on behalf of BevCam, thank you for joining us.